Esports Podcast, Noun. A 2-hour-long video full of banter and nonsense where the guests are only introduced halfway through and the outro makes you think your internet's died.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Daring Minds. Me and Gio are back. The VCT Reykjavik is obviously still ongoing, so what we'll do is we'll use that tournament as a way to talk about the teams at it, some of the matches, but also as a way to spin out into other interesting conversations and topics and whatnot. So we've got a guest here, which is going to be BARBARR, who is obviously the coach of Guild Esports, and actually he's another person I know from CSGO. Actually, the interesting thing, if people don't know, is BARBARR is actually probably one of the most old school people in Valorant Esports, because he actually was playing professionally in CS 1.6 in the latter days of the game. We're talking like 2009, the next couple of years after that. Then he was in CSGO a bit, and then he became a coach. So actually, one thing I want to ask initially, BARBARR, is you've had a pretty weird career arc, because if people don't know, you weren't just like the sniper, the AWPer in Counter-Strike, but you were like a hardcore primary AWPer that only ever had the AWP pretty much. And usually those players, mate, do not become in-game leaders. Those are like usually the opposite mind space of an in-game leader, because it really is the guy just watching a fucking angle, like just only watching the crosshair, isn't it? Like, you know, people don't usually think of those as the cerebral players. So how have you ended up as a coach, mate? Why is this your transition in life?
No, that's true. That's true. I was playing for myself. I was trying to get frags my whole career until pretty much Epsilon, if you remember Epsilon in CSGO, where to be funny, that's a little bit funny stuff, you know. I was joining the team and I was like, yeah, I'm a good player. I've never been in-game leading before, you know, before Epsilon. So I was like, yeah, it's a good chance, you know. Let's go. And on the first practice day, they said, "Hey, you're the in-game leader," you know. And I was, "All right, yeah, that would be good to know beforehand, right?" You know?
Indeed, yeah. If you want me to have anything prepared, at least, yeah.
Five minutes before the first practice, you know, five minutes before the first. Yeah, do you like anything special? You know, do you like any? You know, I would say, yeah. Well, I have a couple of. I'm in-game leading here. All right, guys, so. No, it started there, you know, like I had to take the role to get the spot on the team. You know, I was circling around like the international teams a bit and didn't really get, or I didn't have the attitude, probably we would say that, to get into Fnatic at that time was the closest. Got a couple of requests and but I fell off with Karn once upon a time on a after party.
It's easy to do. It's easy to do. Don't worry, I've been there, mate. We've all been there, I think.
And all respect to him, you know. But
of course,
we fell off a bit, you know, and that was probably also, you know, like you say to young guys, you know, have the attitude, don't fall off with people and stuff like this.
Yes, absolutely.
I had a special attitude back then, really self-centered, and no one is gonna be on top of me kind of stuff. So yeah, no, from back then, from the in-game leading to having to find a way in Epsilon, how do you in-game lead really, you know, how is this all working, and developed my leader skills from them. And then naturally for an in-game leader, I was in-game leading for a good 5-6 years probably after that. And it just fell naturally to become a coach once you find out the beauty in leadership, right?
Sure. Oh, by the way, I'll say definitely as a piece of advice to young men, but sadly, one that they will almost definitely ignore, is actually talking shit to people when you're coming up in the scene is the easiest way to stop yourself getting in teams. Absolutely. It's not even about your skill. That alone will wreck you so much. Like NA players especially, take heed. So many careers have been ruined off shit like that, you know. So in fact, it's usually even, like you say, it's usually not even some massive drama. It's like at just the wrong moment you talk shit to a famous guy, and that's maybe the first moment he's noticed you, and then here's the bad first impression. Yeah, all that.
Yeah, exactly. You're clashing, you know, when you're coming up, you know, the more famous players is having a kind of ego also. You should respect me, kind of, you know, and they will remember if there's anyone sticking up without the experience or tournament experience or anything to back it up with. So that is one of the best tips you can get to a young player. Just be a little bit more quiet than you like to, probably.
Sure. Right, one topic, obviously, it's in the realm of coaching, which we've discussed many times on this show as a general topic, but it's just such a fascinating area to talk about so many things and factors go into a team, is obviously during the VCT, there has been a discussion about coaching due to Chet, formerly I'm a Pet, the coach of Optic, who actually discussed on the last episode with someone that interestingly comes from CSGO as well. We know him, he's in Evil Geniuses, a bunch of other squads, and it's sort of like, I think people respected his knowledge in CSGO. I don't know necessarily if like as a raw coach, I don't know how great a leader he is or whatever. You'd have to ask people inside his team, obviously. But he got in a little bit of trouble now because he's made these comments about, like, essentially, he's contrasted CSGO and Valorant. Spoiler, that's already going to be really unpopular if the conclusion is CSGO is better and you're in Valorant. Like, that should just go without saying, Chet. That one's a bit obvious, mate. And on top of that, if you here's another piece of advice, mate. If you lose to an underdog, maybe don't imply they sort of, like, fucked around and cheesed it or whatever by making it like it's the game that beat you, not the person. Because even though, by the way, you can extract out of these totally valid topics, like, for example, how much can someone hard carry if they have better players in Valorant? How do the comps affect the game contrasted with how, like, a Counter-Strike game would work? How does, like, upsets... Like, these are all great convos. His problem was he bundled them all together in a massive shit sandwich that no one wants to eat because, like, essentially it's not attractive, you know, he's triggered all the wrong people. So I feel like we'll take a step back and we'll try and actually have the interesting parts of this convo. So, okay, what I want to ask is, I'll start with you, Gio. On that part you made, the general gist, which is, listen, it's always going to, sadly, people from CSGO always go to compare this game this way. Unless they're the absolute best in Valorant, winning every match, they're always going to find something that in CSGO they thought would have meant they would have won the match, but then in Valorant they can't win the match for that reason. That's just going to be the way it is. I've seen too many people come from games. If you were good at one, you can never sort of get out of your mind. It's always in the back of your mind somewhere. So this idea that you can't hard carry the game as much, that's a very interesting actual characterization, Gio, because the funny thing is, I actually was sort of told it was the opposite by some of my friends in Valorant. Like, they were telling me, for example, like, dude, could you imagine what, like, Simple and Zebra would do if they had, like, a fucking extra dash after they kill someone or, like, an agent? Like, he was like, they'd be, like, impossible to kill in CSGO. So I'm actually interested as to where this comes from. So, Gio, what do you think about this attempt to contrast? Obviously, it's a bit clumsy, but we'll take it as a serious point. We won't just meme on it like everyone else did.
So, I mean, like, for talking about it from, like, a more general perspective of, like, just simply the concept of contrasting the two games, like, my very blunt answer to that would be, like, well, you're not playing that game, so who gives a shit, right? It's just kind of like, you do sort of have to, you're playing the game you're playing. I don't really care what another game would be. That's kind of that. But yeah, with regards to the point of hard carrying, it's something that we've spoken about before. Like, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, I think. And I, still kind of firmly believe that in Valorant, especially these days, it's not really that viable to have a single hard carry. You can't really 1v9 in this game, especially just like, maybe a few metas ago when it was very like, jet go kill, very flash and dash, like whatever. But it's developed since then. And so much of the game is reliant on things like site setup and utility usage to actually, even the guy who, like, let's say he aces and he's like this jet player who aces, chances are that ace has still been facilitated by, a lot of utility that's been used by the rest of the team, right? So I just think, like, it's not really that viable to talk about hard carries in Valorant. Or if you're on a team where you do only have one person who's doing all of the work, then it's probably not a very good team. So I just personally don't think that that's like a super big thing in this game that's at least
fair enough
long-term viable or anything like that. And if that's contrasting with CS, then cool, pick whichever one you want to be in and, like, go there.
Yeah, there's why, by the way, Chet also set himself up to get memed on, because when he makes those comments, by the way, my first follow-up would be like, well, why don't you have anyone that's good on your team aside from Ye? Isn't that what you're saying when you make a fucking comment like that, you idiot? Like, like, what? That implies your team doesn't have the players to make it work, and you want one guy to hard carry, like what? Because the thing about this, BARBARR, this is what I want to get into. This is one area that CSGO will always be different from Valorant. Valorant, essentially, because of Riot's background, has like a MOBA element in it with the comps and how you set up the different agents. So, like, if I would say it this way, if I was talking to Chet, like, mate, it would be a pretty shit game if that didn't affect the outcome of who won. The fact you're playing a radically different character with totally different abilities. Like, the point in CSGO is we're all on an identical character. It's just about how good we are and what gun we use. Like, and I'll even say this, by the way. I even think in CSGO, like, I wouldn't want any more hard carrying. I think the hard carrying might even be slightly too much, dude. Like, I remember when, like, look, Simple used to be my favourite player, and he used to lose to the Astralis team all the time. I never used to go, the game's broken. It's like, they were all, as a team, they were better. Like, guess what? The best team should beat the best player. The point was his team was flawed, even if he was the best. And they had, like, for real, the best team with, like, all the right pieces, the right roles. That should win in a team game, surely. So I want to get your thoughts on this, Barbar. What are your thoughts generally on, like, contrasting CSGO and Valorant in this regard?
I mean, I would pull it back. Like Valorant right now is forming, you know. So let's be totally honest with it, right? The players who came to Valorant were not, either they didn't have a scene, or they were not good enough for tier 1. We need to be honest with that.
At the beginning, yeah, that was how they got the first place. Sure,
absolutely, you know. So how Valorant is looking right now. It's developing, right? You know, but we saw all those players that is kind of falling off a bit in CSGO. That is falling off in Valorant also. And I would say that right now the players and the teams are learning the fundamentals of the game, right? They're still learning the fundamentals, when to peek, how to play off the plant, blah, 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 you know? And in the beginning, I would say, like Gio, you said, like the meta switches and stuff. What happened was that no one could play against a jet operator before. They were too clumsy in how they were moving, where jet would be, etc., etc. So I would say in that point that players learned how to play a more effective FPS FPS game in a more tactical way. Because in the beginning, it's still there. The fundamentals is the probably the best team I've seen with fundamentals is the guard pracking against the guard in the US team. And I mean, in general, I just think that we're at a phase right now where we're still deciding what players are cut for the top. And who can learn the fundamentals that they really couldn't learn in CSGO, for example, because it will happen the same thing. The game is still like the ground or the basics of the game is still the same as CSGO. You move rotations. You don't want to hit a site with more than 2 people on. You want to guarantee that you don't hit a site with more than 2 players on, and all that. Combined with the knowledge, because the in-game leaders are still tier 2, tier 3 level in terms of how do you approach the game, you know.
Sure.
Obviously, you can go to a site, you know, have the most flawless execution and you know, still win the round, and it can happen in CSGO, but still not. If you're attacking a site where there's 3 players and 1 coming on rotation, you shouldn't be able to win the round in CSGO, for example. But with the abilities and with everything that you can actually neutralize a full site with utility, in CSGO you can't because there is smokes on the Molotovs, right? You can deny something of it, but in Valorant you cannot stop any abilities more than the KO knife, you know.
Right, I see. There's no counter utility in that sense.
Exactly.
Right.
That,
yes.
You know?
Right.
But I would say, like, we're still learning the fundamentals. We're still learning how to play the game most effectively. And if you remember in the beginning of CSGO, that was the same thing, right?
Yeah, for
the most skilled players, they were so far ahead, you know. There's some of them in Valorant right now.
Yep.
But then you need to evolve, you know, then the game is evolving and you need to be more well-rounded in more situations than just the entry fragging or headshots there. It needs to be the attitude, it needs to be the understanding of the full rounds, like where should I position myself, how do I play a 5v4, how do we play a 5v3 most effectively. So I would say we're still in the first years of CSGO in Valorant, still trying to find the best fundamentals in how to play the game more effectively, or as effective as possible. So that is where we are right now, the second year, you know. So I would say we're still developing in Valorant, and it's kind of the same time frame as we had in CSGO, where players got out, you know. He can shoot us, you know, he can shoot so good, you know. But then now when it's a second year, we need something more. We need someone to understand like how to play these situations. You know, you cannot just have a skilled jet right now. You need to have a skilled entry player who knows when to take the duels and not, because you cannot survive on your aim anymore. So it's the same time frame as CS:GO, I would say, and we're still developing. And especially since we got the players and coaches that weren't good enough for tier 1, they still need to reach that tier 1 level, because it's in the end it's the same. It's a FPS shooter, and the tactical aspect or the understanding of the game is still equally important, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, by the way, if anyone didn't ever watch CSGO, if you ever go back to watch early games, it's going to look terrible compared to modern CSGO. Like, not even just the shooting part, just they won't understand any basic tactics, retakes. Like, but if people don't know, we didn't even use the Molotov for the first few years. It's actually like one of the best pieces of utility, it turns out. It's just the joke is, and this is actually relevant to Chet here, because people came from past versions of Counter-Strike that didn't have the Molotov, we all thought the same thing. Like, that's just some stupid gimmick thing that an idiot dev put in who doesn't know the game. Like, why would you ever use that? And the joke is, that's the move. I always say, if you could do like the Back to the Future where you had that fucking almanac with all the results of the sports and you went and bet on all the sports in the time machine. If you had the time machine, one of the first things you would do in CSGO, no joke, is you would go back in time, you'd use Molotovs, you'd use the Krieg, you'd use the UMP. These guns were all OP as fuck. No one even tried them. No one used them. It was mental, like. So there's plenty of things that, like, in CSGO, we definitely weren't all professors who figured it out in fucking year 1. It took years to figure this stuff out. I mean, as you're saying, if it works to play off your aim, you play off your aim at the beginning. A lot of people did that, just stacked skilled teams, a la the Sentinels of the world in Valorant. It's no surprise they've done a similar thing here. Right, Gio, along these lines though, like, what do you, the problem I think with the way he phrased it was this, is as a coach, I can totally understand why you would call something a cringy comp, because to you, essentially, it's like saying cheese. Like, you're sort of saying, like, look, it works in a way, but maybe it only works like once and against me now, and only because I didn't like prep for it, and it's not really like real value. It's like that sort of like an elitist type vibe. The problem is though, Gio, I don't really get that in terms of like saying it publicly, because to me it's like, I mean, the aim of a coach is to win the game though, right? If I beat you with that, it did work. Like, you can't listen, you could not like that it worked, but it did work, right? I'm supposed to beat you with it.
Well, this was kind of like the tweet that Lothar did, where Lothar was like, I don't know why a tier 1 coach is saying this, because like, if they beat you with that comp, then they beat you. They were the better team.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That's it, right? And it's like, the other thing as well is like, I don't even know if I would call any of the comps that Optic played against cringy. Like, usually to me, if I think of like a cringy comp, I'm thinking of something really like out there, you know, like in Overwatch, you bring a Bastion, you put an Orisa in front of it, like stuff like that, like really like, oh, come on, why are you doing that? Like rank star kind of shit. But like, to me, I just got the vibe that it was like, yeah, they're playing a team from a different region who have a different way of playing. Like, to me, it's weird seeing that, like, you know, when Xerxia were playing against them on Icebox in their first game, they didn't bring a chamber. Like, to me, as someone who's watched a lot of like the, you know, the Western way of playing Valorant of late, like, I would think like, oh yeah, you know, yeah, bringing a chamber, that's kind of normal. Or even like a KO. They didn't do either of those things. That doesn't necessarily mean it's cheesy or it's cringy. Like, they had a perfectly valid composition, to be perfectly honest. And for me, it just really, it reminds me of like, you know when you're playing like ranked, and you are like the last person alive, and your teammates who already died are telling you how shit you are, and it's like, well, you're the one who's fucking dead. Like, what? True. You know, it's like, it just kind of reminds me of that. It's like, why are you getting all like, it's almost ego-y and just kind of like defensive about something? It's like, you're the one who didn't win. Like, you're the one who like, who, you know, and I'm a big fan of Optic. I love this team. I think they're a fantastic team. Yeah. And Chet has done a lot for them, because he's been there throughout stage 1 of this year as well, where they've done fantastically. And actually, even in the game that Optic played against Xerxia yesterday, where Optic won, Victor said in his final interview, like, they actually brought up, you know, the Chet thing, and he was like, to be honest, like, I wouldn't have performed the way that I did without Chet. Like, he's done so much for us, like, blah, 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 blah. So I don't have a problem with Chet, and I really don't have a problem with the team. But for me, like, that kind of, I don't know, that attitude, or even just saying that, whether it was inferred correctly or incorrectly by everyone else, it's still the words that came out of his mouth, and it's like, just don't be a sore loser. Like, you lost the game because they played better. That's fine. Like, and if you're blaming it on a composition, like, yeah, maybe it's not a composition you're used to playing against, but that just means that it's time for you to grow the kinds of things that you're preparing for, right? Like, that doesn't mean like, oh, they fucked us because they used this composition. Like, and therefore they're the ones in the wrong. No, just use it as a learning. Like I don't know.
I would say right that what he did was stating a answer like in general, but I think you always like if you're a little bit they're memeing as shit in NA, right? They're memeing the like maybe he tried to be a little bit put up a cringe ass because they didn't play a weird comp. They played a completely normal comp on both of the maps. Sure, there could be a chamber, like instead they use Killjoy probably or something similar, But I think his general just answered like a question, but probably when you have a after the game interview, guys, you want to be as specific as possible on what you have just done, not pulling out general answers. That was what he said. What he said after like this was a general answer on a question, So
sure.
No, I would say like he. What he's saying, guys, like he's saying that in Valorant you can pull up comps that no one have been practicing against, right?
Yes.
And you will not be used against. We played against one of the teams that is in Iceland right now, right? And they pulled off a comp on Bind that we felt like, why are we even practicing against this, because no one else will do it.
Yes.
We got absolutely destroyed, guys. I will tell you, it was one of the Asian teams absolutely destroyed on a map where we normally are very, very dominating, just because they pulled up some three agents that you normally don't play.
Sure.
And when you're not used to that and it's suddenly showing up in front of you with pressure also, let's say in a tournament setup, then you cannot do that in CSGO,
Yeah, exactly.
For example, but that's possible in Valorant right now to just singular, like go to a bomb site and do this combination of things that the enemy have never seen before, So he generalized an answer up in a post-game interview, which is maybe not the smartest thing to do, The flame that is coming is probably correct because he did it in a post-match interview instead of a normal if he would be sitting in my seat right now.
Yeah, exactly. You have plenty more space. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. So that's a bit
Sure.
media training on Mr. Chet, and he's probably gonna be okay. But what he said is that he generalized, a general answer on a question on something, and probably a bit frustration behind it.
Of course.
But everything coming from him after that is legit. Obviously, you need to be careful of what you're saying after a game. Just and
Sure.
nothing about the opponents. Also, you need to be praising them, either if you like it or not. It doesn't matter. They play good. Always put away a bit of pressure on yourself, right? That's the thing. You're humble. You won't get shit. Oh, that's a very nice human, especially 22 on the internet. You probably want to act a little bit more humble, especially when you lose, or even when you're winning. So, bit clumsy, but I see where he's going from. But after playing a super normal comp, some 2 maps, you shouldn't really be talking about that, right?
I also think as well, by the way, like, I think this is also an area where people are going to struggle when they come from CSGO, because this is what it's like when you're practicing League of Legends. In League of Legends, right, you might sometimes have a scrim session booked and you're thinking, normal practice, right, we're going to get some good games in. But then the opponent only does like a weird cheesy comp that they're going to do against someone else in one game. You're never going to use it. You're never going to even play against it. And so you feel like, what the fuck, this is like a waste of my time. But what you have to realise is in games that have different comps, it's give and take. Sometimes you're going to have that. Sometimes you're going to be the one doing that. Whereas obviously in CSGO, you arrive and you're both practicing your shit anyway. True, people might be practicing some extreme, like only attack one site, but it's still going to look like normal CS. So the problem is, like, I can also see why, like, there's sort of an understandable reason he'd complain there, but it's just that is just the reality of the game you're in, mate. Like, you have to adapt to the game you're in now. We can't go back to CSGO, boys.
That's everything. Everything.
Like, I just wanted to like go off of
come on.
that you made before, which was you know, that in Valorant, it's like, yeah, it might not be a composition you're used to going against or something that you're not used to or you've prepared against, but like it can come up. And at the end of the day, when you get into international competition, that can be the difference between, well, A, it can be the difference between you qualifying and not qualifying.
Sure.
But B, it can be the difference between getting into playoffs, getting into finals, losing the finals, you know? And so it's like, it's never worth it to kind of hand wave it away and be like, oh, well, that's a stupid composition because like we're not used to seeing it. It's like that composition can be the reason that you do or don't like make it, right? And it's like, I understand there's a little bit of a sore spot between Optic and Xerxia anyway, even though Chet wasn't on the team back then. But because of like what happened at Champs and stuff, and sure, now they've had their vindication, but like it can be, that can be the difference, and that nearly could have happened to Optic in this event.
The other thing I would say if you're someone like Chet is this, right? You've got to be really careful who the target is, because in this scenario, it sounds like you blame your opponent for beating you. That's where it's silly. Here's the thing. If you shifted it and you made it like, I don't like this about Valorant, the game, like essentially I'm asking the devs to change the game. That's the angle to take, because the funny thing is what he's doing now, there's a super famous esports example of this behavior. It was the old school StarCraft player, Idra, because what he would do was, he thought, right, that he had a really high level understanding of the game. As far as I know, he did. He was a great RTS player. But what he would do was he would play what he thought was like correct StarCraft, and if you ever cheesed him or did some like gimmicky shit and beat him, he'd blame you for not playing the way, right? He would blame you for not playing the way you should have, which would have made you lose to him. For real, like he would just do this. Even though in that scenario, again, if he just blamed the game and said, you know, I actually think it's made the game not as good, you know, it's supposed to be like chess, but you've added sort of like a gimmick, that would be a cool way to praise it. But instead, same thing, he made himself look like a dickhead, because what he was doing was, it was like he was blaming the other guy for like fucking knocking him out in a fight. It's a fight, dude. Like, what do you expect? Like, he's going to do whatever he takes to win, isn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree completely, you know. And as a coach also, you know, as an older coach also, you know, you cannot act like a player, you know. Like I told you beforehand, you will probably not get the rockets of RDs when I'm here, you know. Like, that's because I learned, and that's the approach you need to take. And he's experienced enough to probably, you know, make it look okay in a loss, you know. That is most important as a coach, you know. Like, don't go out and rock and roll it without any reason, especially in a loss. You will double down on a loss, right? You know, so yeah, a bit clumsy, right?
By the way, here's another tip. It also would have worked if you made that comment as to why you lost the previous time when you won the rematch. If you won the rematch and you were like, look, they were just pulling out cringy comps in the other game, but, you know, we like, even though it's the same comment, at least because you're off a win then, it's sort of almost like, that'd be the time to sort of sound like you're trash talking the opponent. Don't do it when they just beat you and they're an underdog. That's why every fucking fan out there is now against you, out there, they're hoping they beat you again the next time. One thing I thought you brought up that was an interesting point though, BARBARR, I wanted to ask about actually, is when you were saying about how people learned, like, for example, how to play against the duelists. That actually also is a thing I feel like, this is where too many people coming over think it's just an FPS like Counter-Strike. It's just like, how good am I? How skilled am I, etc. Because one thing that was really interesting to me in Overwatch actually that developed was people learned from the MOBA elements, just like in MOBA, there are certain super powerful abilities and you have to know on your team which abilities counter that, and you actually have to save them specifically for when they use it. So Gio will know this, the most famous one ever was, even though Genji is a character that can completely take over an Overwatch match, the joke is if you play correctly against the Genji in like Overwatch League, he wouldn't be doing anything because he could never do the ultimate, because if he did the ultimate, literally your team would have a character who was just waiting for that one ultimate and to counter it instantly. You remember, Gio, it was like half the game was just waiting for that to happen, wasn't it? You were just like waiting for when they're going to do it and the time. And so I assume similar things must have happened with how you deal with the duelists, etc. Like, you're not just going to let them run over the whole game. Someone's going to figure out what you save and then when you throw it and how to interrupt them, etc. Right?
I think in Valorant, so one of the big things I remember seeing someone else say about Valorant ages ago, and I was like, oh my god, they're right, is that there aren't really a ton of direct counters in Valorant, which makes it kind of cool. So in Overwatch, I think it was a lot more like there were certain abilities that directly countered like another ability, which isn't necessarily the same in Valorant. I think also the way that, like, in Overwatch, you didn't have to consider, like, I'm going to save this ultimate, or I'm going to use this ultimate specifically in a place that is going to boost my like weapons economy, because that wasn't a concept in Overwatch, right? So it's like you could specifically save your ultimates for those certain moments to counter someone else's ultimate, or to like play that mind game to force someone else to use their ultimate, or to not allow them to use their ultimate, like whatever it is. In Valorant, those, you know, a number of those things are still valid, but there are other instances in which you might want to use your ultimate where they are really valuable to your team that would cause you to then not have them later on for those situations that are more akin to what you'd have in Overwatch. So I think in Valorant there are like more reasons or more correct quote unquote times to use an ultimate than there are in Overwatch, because in Overwatch there are very wrong times to use an ultimate, because a lot of it is like you at least want to combine it with one other ultimate on your team in a lot of instances, stuff like that. Whereas like in Valorant it might be like, okay, we are going to use the showstopper on this round because like if we can pull this, you know, if we can kill this person or get this advantage, cause this to be an expensive round for them, then great, like that's good for us, we can boost our economy, we can take their weapons, blah, 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 rather than just necessarily like, oh, this person will have their ultimate, therefore we're going to use the showstopper for this round to deny that ultimate to be used. You know, and so I think, there are kind of more instances in Valorant where you might want to use an ultimate, which means it's not necessarily a one-for-one comparison to how you might in Overwatch.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I would say like, but we're still calculating all of this stuff, you know. Like now we're coming to an era where you're actually counting the orbs, you know. You're counting the ult orbs, you know. So, I mean, if you want to be a little bit ahead, you know, but we're not still yet there, you know. Like, so okay, for the next weapon round, you know, he will probably have, you know, we say we're playing an anti-eco. Okay, so here 5 of 7, you know, you can plan a little bit ahead in that terms, you know. So for example, anti-eco, when you die you get an orb, right? You know, you get a free orb. So for example, the next one, they will probably go for the easiest orb and stuff like this. It's not super clear, you know. It could be on a so much more higher level in Valorant still, I feel, but before you need to get all the fundamentals set, right? You know, we're still far from the absolute peak of tactical Valorant. We're very far. We're maybe on 60-70% right now, because individual skill is still very valuable. It's still very valuable. So I would say like probably in a time frame we could see the complete difference between the games or whatever, you know. But right now we're still trying to teach the players the absolute fundamentals in how to play situations, instead of like really going in hard on the small details, if it makes sense, in that one. So I still think we have a little bit 40% left until we can really see maybe the Overwatch contra Valorant ultimates, for example. I haven't been in Overwatch myself, guys. I need to be super honest, you know. I don't know super much. I've been watching some games, you know. I think the hype and everything is super nice, but still not a professional in it, or a professional knower in it. So but yeah, maybe we get there.
She wasn't in CS, so don't worry. Right, what about this then? Let's talk about some of the actual VCT then, and then we'll also spiral into some other topics. So Geo, right, now it's looking fucking sick that we had that episode a couple ago about the Koreans, because DRX actually is really good. They actually are really good.
Sick. I mean, to be honest, like, the way that the whole group stage has turned out has almost, you know, put my tail between my legs a little bit, because like people would say to me like, you know, how do you think it's going to go? And I'm like, I don't know. I think like Optic probably look like one of the best teams right now. And then obviously Optic fucking shat the bed on their first game. And DRX won both of their games, which is probably something that I would have foreseen. I did think that DRX would do really well, especially after the conversation that we had with Achilleos. He really sold them to me. I did not expect Zeta Division to do as well as they have done, the Japanese team. This is the team that kind of essentially relinquished their opportunity to go to champs because they wanted to rebuild the team. and Japan have never been super impressive on an international. They've always been fun, but not necessarily impressive. Fnatic going 0-2. Yes, they had unfortunate circumstances where they had to have, a couple of extra players be brought into the roster to make up for the fact that Durka got COVID and Brave essentially got, reprimanded or whatever happened there. But Fnatic being the first team to go home, did not have that on my bingo card. So I really feel like there's so much that has happened. And I mean, like, Team Liquid, who weren't even supposed to be in the event, winning Group B, like they're at the top of the table in Group B. So, it's interesting that we have a record of all of the predictions that we have made, because I can't pretend that I wasn't totally fucking wrong.
What do you think specifically on the DRX angle, though? What do you like? For example, they've drawn the Paper X team so far in the play, so like there's a real chance they're going deep in this tournament.
Yeah, Paper X will be interesting. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen them play. I think that sort of what I vaguely remember about the way that Paper X play, I think that DRX probably have this. I mean, DRX, as we spoke about before, a very like disciplined team, and I think going against Zeta and NIP in the group stage was something that I was really interested in, because both Brazil and Japan have always kind of been slightly, I don't want to say less disciplined, but less really structured regions. I was actually more interested in seeing if they were going to play, like had they gone up against Fnatic, for example, and played like a European team that would have come from a kind of a more disciplined, structured approach. I think that Paper X, they are also one of these kind of a slightly more free-flowing teams in just their playstyle, at least from what we saw of them last year. So I think that DRX, what has worked for them so far, which is that structure, will probably come up on top against Paper X, in my opinion.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the DRX team, BARBARR? Do you know much about the Koreans, by the way, in this game? Because obviously they weren't that relevant in CSGO, but it's actually a lot of the same people, it seems like.
Yeah. Jesus. Just came out of COVID, guys, so bear with me.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, the funny part of not being at the Masters is to prac against all of the teams that is actually in Europe. So I would say.
Have you practiced against this team?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
I have practiced against Paper X also, and I mean, I think DRX having a lot of fundamentals set. I don't think Paper X really have the fundamentals set, but they are pushing. Let's compare it to CS:GO. Let's do a little chat here,
yeah, do it.
Like in CS:GO, like there's some teams that won't let you play the game, right? They won't let you get to execute. They will punish you before. They will play like a Macarena kind of game, And I would say Paper X is the same. They try to punish you in against European teams or some very structured teams. That turns you off, like if you don't know how to handle it. And as I said, we're not really there yet how to handle different play styles, right? Because now we are trying to learn fundamentals, really hard. Hey, they don't give a F about fundamentals, They don't. Okay. They just
like to fight all the time or something.
They show up in your face. They show up in your face so many times that you will have to adjust really hard and play like a game that you don't really train at normally. Take it as comparing to someone showing up with 2-3 agents that you never have been seeing on the map for more than in ranked, like you said, Gio. So. It's kind of that Paper X will show up, they are very. Paper X will send it. They will send it on you. They are pretty structured with utility, but they will not calculate. They will not calculate how many can be here, how many can be there. They will just show up. They will show up and they will fight the same positions so many times. Also, you don't think someone is gonna do the same thing? I call it a G2. Someone will do the same thing for like 9-10 rounds a row. You're trying to read the next move, right? Like in CSGO. Okay, they went offensive here. They will probably not do it again because we just saw what they were doing and we have the timing on it. But But that's a surprise in itself, right? To do the same thing over and over when you're trying to rotate over to the other side or trying to read like, okay, so if they do this, they won that round. Maybe they want to move over to the other side, you know, but they just continue doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that is confusing itself. If you understand me correctly, like you're trying to read, but in the end they will just do the same thing. So you just need to counter that special place that they are doing stuff on, you know. And yeah, so they're very, very different teams. I would say very different teams in terms of how they're playing the game. Super different. I cannot say who will win, because that playstyle that Paper X is having, that will make it hard. That will make it super hard to play against in general, and especially yourself. You know, when you come to LAN, probably most of the guys that is there, or many that is there, is having the first tournament experience, right?
Yeah.
So all of this, you know, and add a bit of nerves into it.
Yes.
It will be super different.
By the way, just as a quick aside, were you actually surprised at the level of the DRX team?
Yeah.
Were they better than you thought they would be?
Compared to the last year, yeah, they're evolving. Evolving super fast. They really are. And I think like the meta switches and everything, you know, I really think that they're following it super hard. I think they're on top of the metas, and they're working hard, you know, like I call it like an Asian level, you know, where they really are pinning out every kind of position that you could be in, instead of maybe like the Western style where, okay, if this guy is here, he shouldn't be at this place, right? If this guy is here, he shouldn't be at this place. So, no, they very cover all the corners that you actually can play in, and you will not surprise them with the position, because they are already cutting out all the positions with the util before they're going. If he's there, he will be, you know, like they don't really use the hyper logic. They have their own style, and they're following it hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm interested in is so actually these two teams played against each other at Masters Berlin, and in that series, I was just looking back on it now, Paper Rex were great at attacking against Vision Strikers, but they were horrible at defending against them. And I feel like that really leans into what you're kind of saying, where it's like they have this very specific, sometimes unusual way of playing, and they can really try and like, you know, prevent the opponent from being able to do something, and they have that sort of like, I suppose, more room to be really aggressive when they're on the attack. But on the defense, if there's something really like structured and thought out and whatever coming against them, like maybe they fall apart a little more, especially if they're bringing in like these strange compositions that you allude to. And I'm wondering, you obviously, Masters Berlin is like 6 months ago now. This is some time ago. I am curious to see like what has changed amongst these two teams, like when they come up against each other, or to see if that is actually going to be a similar thing that happens where Paper X just really struggle to defend against DRX.
By the way, random note, if someone's a CSGO fan, I actually noticed that one of the players on the Paper X team, Forsaken, who was not the infamous cheater Forsaken, was actually the brother of Excurate from CSGO, who was the author for Tai Lu. If people don't know. Yeah, apparently it was his brother, so interesting detail. Cool. What about this then? So the other team, obviously, from the Group A that had DRX that we have to talk a bit about is, of course, the aforementioned Zeta, the Japanese team. Yeah. So, right, here's the thing, BARBARR, right? If it's a surprise at the level of DRX, surely nobody could know this team was actually going to be good. Like, this feels like this has to be the surprise out of nowhere, right?
Absolutely. Like, I don't know if I don't think they play the same game versus each other like they play in the versus the international teams. I feel they have like a pocket, you know, ace in the pocket or something similar. You know, the sleeve probably you say. I think that they are pulling up something something different. I was very, if you say Xerxia, you say like I don't know how you even
Xerxia, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think, maybe it happened in League of Legends also, because we cannot compare to CSGO really, you know, like maybe it happened in League of Legends where the Asian teams really were on top of the utility usage, we're super timed in it or whatever, you know. Optic losing the first game was a hyper shock against the Cercia team, right? That was one of the upsets in the tournament so far. I would say that I don't think anyone is prepared on the level of utility usage that they do. You know, I would say that you need to face them early. You cannot give them the space, you know, give them the space to come in absolute perfect execute possibilities, because that's not gonna be good.
Are you saying they just use more utility than the Western teams? Like, what is it? What's the distinction
here?
The
timing of it is just different, you know. Like, they have millisecond timings, like we did in CS:GO, we say, you know, so that you can compare that they have milliseconds timings on flash, peek, flash, peek, smoke, peek, jump out, Molotov here. All of this is timed to absolute perfection that I cannot see any team doing in the Western. Only team I see similar to this is probably the Guard in NA that is doing the same. So it's more that you're not used to that timings, you know. You're used to a little bit sloppy flash, and the peak is coming out like maybe you know yourself, half a second too late, you peek on a flash, and that could be determine the round, you know. So I just think the timings on what they're doing stuff when they get the space is on an absolute top level compared to the Western or the NA teams. Yeah.
Okay, fair play.
I also think it's interesting how much Sugar Zero, who's their controller, seems to be really involved in what the entries are doing, you know. So like, he'll do a lot of like lurking, whatever, but there's like a lot of instances, especially on the defense, and I'm thinking of the game that they played against Fnatic on Fracture, which was a map that ostensibly should have been Fnatic's map, just him being really involved in a lot of the same gunfights that they were doing. His statistics by the end of the game were typically kind of higher than what you would necessarily expect from a controller. Like, usually a controller player, you're not looking to be at the top of the scoreboard. And actually, funny enough, he has insisted on playing so much Astra as well. Like, they've been bringing Astra Viper into their games, which is something that a lot of, at least the Western regions, have kind of abandoned. I don't think it's something that DRX have been doing either. I think they've sort of like left that alone as well. And Zeta Division have really like knuckled down on still, you know, facilitating this sort of last meta kind of like play style. I think that Laz as a player has obviously always been really impressive on Zeta Division, but I was also really impressed with 10. Again, on that Fracture map, notably when he was playing Raze, like his ability to take space and deny space from Fnatic was incredibly impressive, in my opinion. He had some really good showstoppers as well. Oh, it was fantastic. And so it's just like, I think that you know, judging by both my own opinion and also things that I heard the desk kind of talking about, is one of the ways that you can kind of encapsulate the attitude towards Zeta right now, is that there are more people on the team that we are impressed by than we necessarily expected to be impressed by. Like, even if we're just looking at individual level. But obviously what they've achieved as a team together as well, they're now the first Japanese team to have ever made playoffs at an international event. I don't know if you guys saw the clip on the Japanese cast of like Laz crying in the interview when like the Japanese casters brought up with him that they were now the first like Japanese team to have done that. And it's just crazy how much work they've put in, and knowing that them choosing to not go to or not try and get into champions and restructuring and kind of like building themselves again has paid off. Yes. It's paid off. True. And that is like just honestly, as a fan, heartwarming. Yeah, you know, cool. It's like, that's a great story, because I didn't have tons of high hopes for them. I thought it was going to be DRX and Fnatic who were going to be going through into playoffs from this group.
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, the first game they got blown out, right? You know, they got 5 rounds on 2 maps or something similar. You know, so it was like, you know, if Fnatic lose against this, you know, it's gonna be. But I would say, like, to be honest, you know, we practice against Fnatic. We practice some maps against Fnatic before they play the tournament, and then when they play the tournament, and I would say it's not the same Fnatic that it really is far away from the Fnatic we say with Brave and Derke in it, you know. It's very, very different. And I would say like I told the guys, it was one of the maps, I think it was 14-10 or something similar. Normally when you win pracs against Fnatic, because they really try hard, everyone needs to try hard in practice, don't get me wrong guys, you know, that's how you can become better. But I told the guys, like, really guys, we should have 20 rounds here. This is not good enough, you know. There was a VOD review on a map on a map where we win, you know, and it was one of the longest we had so far this split after Fnatic game. So I wasn't hyper surprised that Zeta was able to beat Fnatic. It was not like, all right, you know. It was more like, Fnatic is having 2 subs. They are looking completely different, you know. I think Derke is you know, everyone memeing about it, you know, but really he is such a crucial player to that team that I would say I don't want to take anything away from Zeta, you know. They did it great, you know, like honestly, you know, and it's a milestone as an Asian team to come far in a FPS game, right? It's not really have been there before. So but I would say the reason that the Fnatic lost that game was for sure the 2 subs that they were using. I'm happy. I'm super happy for them to do it. You know, let's be a little bit Swedish over here. You know, I'm super happy for them. But I see the reason why they're going this far is because of the 2 subs that Fnatic had to use or was forced to use. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, then if we talk about the other group a little bit then. So, okay, Gio, Team Liquid wasn't even supposed to be at the tournament, but they're already in the playoffs and apparently might be a relevant team.
Yeah, I caught a bit of one of the Team Liquid games, and I don't remember which one it was. But they did just look I just remember them looking very put together. I know that one of the big criticisms that Team Liquid have had of late is them just like trying different things. We spoke about on the last episode that they've had a bunch of like role swaps in a lot of that, like they don't have super consistent roles in a lot of what it is that
I saw an interview. They were even actually like bigging up the fact that they think it's great that they have like 3 or 4 agents each and they can like play duelists depending on who wants to on the map or whatever. They think it's like a strength of theirs.
That's what they want to do, and I can understand that being like a goal and being what you want. But you know how you see something in your head is not necessarily always how the world sees it, and I think that Team Liquid have definitely had their hiccups over time where they have been a bit ambitious, I think, with that sort of thing. But you can't deny that they have looked incredibly strong so far in the tournament. They're going to be playing up against Loud in the upper bracket quarterfinals, which, again, Loud were from Brazil, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that...
You favour them to win?
I favour Team Liquid to win. I think that one of the things that Team Liquid have, which is just... Yeah, there are other teams in the tournament that also have this, but I think just such extreme veteranship. I think I think that when it comes to these LAN events, like they don't have like often really big like chokes or anything because they feel very comfortable in that environment. Yep. And I think that kind of comfort for Team Liquid is what allows them to really perform. And Absolutely. Even when there are certain things about like, you know, these creative decisions about how they want to play that can be questioned, and you can criticize them or you can love them, whatever it is, like when it gets to this LAN environment, they know what they're doing. Like they are not new kids on the block who are getting the jitters. Like they are very comfortable in themselves, and that definitely helps when it, you know, comes to this.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like touching on that, like it's still the players with the tournament experience that will reach the furthest, you know. We have G2 there also, who is having the tournament experience, like you're saying. Like the Liquid, they're very comfortable being under pressure, you know, and that is the players, or that is the teams that is gonna reach the furthest right now. That is just that, you know. And I would say G2 and Liquid, they're not very versatile in their game plan or their tactics, you know. They're not like, wow, you know. It's more like they don't just do this stupid peaks or this stupid that because of emotions, or because getting very, very excited over being at a tournament. I kill one, I kill two, I will go for the third. That's not happening. That's not happening with the G2 and the Liquid players, and that's what they have so much advantage over the others that haven't been competing on a high level before. So I would say, if G2 and Liquid is not evolving their tactical game plan or their book, they will fall off. That will be that. I can put everything I have on it. That Liquid and G2 will have a hard time if they're not evolving their tactical book, because right now they're living off that their players is not getting stressed, is not feeling the nerves or whatever. Even if you put even an audience there, they will probably be dominating the scene right now. So we're still in an early phase, and I agree completely with that. They're just comfortable in so many situations and not feeling the stress in a tournament setup that most of the team doesn't have right now. They will make that extra peak that they will lose the round, They will put that utility compared to CSGO, if you put your Molotov, for 10 seconds too early, for example, when it's a match winning or round winning Molotov, that is going to make a huge difference of the game. So I say that G2 and Liquid really have the experience going with them in this tournament, but that will change pretty fast. Maybe it's in this split coming, maybe it's the next season, but that is what they're living off right now, really, to with calm, yourself, when you're calm in your brain, you makes the most logical decisions all the time, and that's what they're living off right now. I have a feeling of, yeah.
What do you actually think about like I said, they themselves, we had someone on the show in past episodes that criticised this, but I actually said, I saw the Jampy interview where he actually thinks this is like a strength of theirs, that basically a bunch of them play the duelists and a bunch of them have agent pools that sort of mean, I could play this on this map and then you could play on that map. They think that's a strength. Here's the problem, like Gio said, I can see theoretically that's brilliant. Yeah, of course, if you could make that work, you'd be the ultimate team. The question is, A, how much can you make it work? And B, if it really does work, why don't everyone else do it? So what do you think on this topic, BARBARR?
I mean, guys, being versatile is super nice. It's a strength, to have really players to be able to play under pressure, playing different agents. Because the thing is, right, every map is different, Nuke is not going to be Dust 2 in CS, right? So for different maps, or for players that is more mechanically gifted with the utility, it's gonna make a difference to swap the agents on it. If it's a map where you don't require to be really super mechanically gifted, or putting out the utility in really, really fast timing, or then you can play one agent there. But when it comes to let's take something like, for example, Split in Valorant. It's a really fast decision making with your util if you want to react on it. So, for example, it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense, but then there is always a limit where how experienced are you on the agent? How comfortable are you on the agent when there's pressure applied? Yes. It's always need to be compared to pressure, Yes. How good will you be? Everyone on a sunny day can play whatever in Valorant. I tell you that. Everyone of the young guys is in rank. They play Jet, they play Killjoy, they play Omen, they play whatever, But in under pressure, how good are you? And then I think if you like a Liquid, probably is a very versatile team-ish, that helps them because they're still calm. They will not break under pressure. So for now, I would say it makes sense, but probably I would say that they rolled a bit of casino on their comps in officials, and it didn't pay out that much. But still, they are in Masters, They beat us for a spot in it, and that's you gotta give it to them that they actually can do that under pressure to be able to play it still. So, yeah.
Okay. Right, here's the thing, Gio. Even though we've got a whole bunch of matchups in the playoffs that either look like obvious it's a big favourite, or like it's an unknown team no one knows about, right? The big match is obviously the Guard versus Optic. I mean, we've got the two NA teams again playing, but now it's like this, in theory, could be a massive bragging rights game, and who knows, the winner of this might win the tournament. Like, what are your thoughts on who is favoured in this matchup? How would you pair the two teams together?
Yeah, because so they played each other in the upper bracket finals in NA playoffs, and then they played together in the grand finals of NA playoffs, and now they're back playing each other here. And if I'm Optic, I'd probably be, I don't want to say like super nervous, and I think the fact that they won their last game and according to them, just found like a way to sort of like bring their mental back. I hope that they're going to go into it with like a solid, expectation of themselves and not too worried. But I think that the Guard are in a really strong position right now because they've seen Optic have a really disastrous game. They've seen where Optic's weak spots really can be. Obviously, they have like their own experiences with Optic that they can go back and VOD review. There is the fact that Optic have played 3 games that the Guard haven't had to play, and so the Guard have more information on Optic than Optic have on the Guard, because like most teams, I'd imagine that, the Guard have also come into this tournament with certain strats up their sleeve and certain compositions and whatnot that like Optic aren't necessarily expecting and don't know about. I think that the Guard, the big thing that could make the outcome different is the fact that the Guard, for the most part, don't have LAN experience. So, with, like we were just talking with Team Liquid, like, sometimes you can be a team that can be a bit more shaky online, but be really solid on LAN. And I know you've spoken about that as being a big thing during COVID in CS, where like the best teams suddenly changed because of that.
Yes.
Or you can have, teams that look incredible online and actually then, because they have like no LAN experience, look like a different team entirely. And that is the big question mark for me.
Right. That's sort of lurking behind the match.
Right. Now, I think like, we have hyped, and when I say we, I mean the community as a whole, have hyped the value of MC so much that I almost want to go into it and kind of almost naively be like, well, he's clearly like the best coach in NA right now.
Okay.
Like he's going to make sure that they're
right,
mental.
okay.
Yeah, he'll have made sure that they're going in with the right attitude. And I'm sure that they have been like prepped for it, but it's still like that first moment on the stage is still yet to come for a lot of these players. But yeah, for me, I think that there's those pros and cons on either side. There's the fact that we've seen these glaring flaws from Optic, and we've also got a team who have, for the most part, haven't played on LAN before. And which of those factors is going to be the biggest one or the most influential one? I don't know.
Who do you favour then, BARBARR? You said you were practicing the Guard. Have you practiced Optic as well?
No, with the old lineup, we had a scrim and they were talking shit, and we had Draken, and he's good at talking shit also. So can I say shit on this?
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about that. By the way, we also heard something similar that apparently Optic was trash talking. I just said the same thing, that when they came over, all the NA teams were like that.
I don't know what happened. Like we had a scrim against them last Berlin, and they were just talking trash, like I'm one of those myself, I was, we all grow up one day, and trying to be a better human, but I would say they came in and they just talked so much, or writing in chat, like it was some kind of mental game issue, and then they got Draken on it, and they got Yasin on it, I think also, and we were just sitting and chatting until I had to say, guys, can we prac a bit now? What is this? Is this
sure? It's not a chat session, yeah. Sure, exactly.
What the fuck? We're fucking chatting here, but yeah, no, they were not. We had those players too that is not really backing down. They need to let the opponents know their view on what's getting said, So after that, the Optic is not accepting any practice against us, even though we have a completely new lineup right now.
Yeah.
So it's I haven't practiced against Optic, but I would say like I expressed on Twitter also, if the pressure is not getting to them, I haven't seen any team so far that having the fundamentals so hard set like the Guard is having. So
they're just the best team for you then, right?
I would say so, but I haven't seen Optic, I haven't faced them in a practice, because that's what you need to do, right? You need to see them live and see, I know how good my guys is on practice, and I know what we can do on this map, But I would say, like, we haven't been 13-0'd on a map ever since I started out. It's 2 years with Guild now, and they 13-0'd us. I was completely in shock in how they were playing, you know, and that we were coming from 10 days break or whatever, but I haven't seen that kind of discipline and you know, even when they had 12-0, they you know, or 13-0, they played the situations like I practiced against Astralis many times also, and that is the only team I have seen in FPS that when they are actually won the game or when they 13-0,
they still keep playing properly.
Continue to do that shit, even if you're 1-on-5. You know, they continue to do that nasty stuff. If
people don't know, in CS:GO, it's famous that when you've sort of won the scrim, you just dick around and do stupid stuff and don't care. But these guys, because they were the best team ever, they really were that diligent.
Yeah. So I will give a lot of credit.
No, respect.
No, a lot of credits, and I talked to their coach also, you know, and I was like, yo, dude, we came back from 10 days off, you know, could we have another practice? Because I noticed that they will make us better, you know, they will make us better, and that's something we should aim to be, you know, that's something we should aim to do in practice, to really, you know, don't give anyone confidence, doesn't matter what situation it is, you know. If you give a certain player confidence, you know, we take the Western, you know, we take CNED, we take Nukia. If you give any of those players that confident in a 1-on-5, for example, he getting 3 kills, the next round he will actually bounce out of that, you know, and actually will destroy you completely. So, no, first time I've been seeing that from a team in Valorant, and I was happy. I was happy to be a part of it, even if it 13-0. That was something you can show to the guys, and this is what we aim for, you know. So, but it's the pressure, guys, you know, it's the pressure. It's everything, you know. If they start to feel, you know, like, Optic is probably a little bit better than us, you know, normally, or we are having that's a team that actually can punish us, you know, and it's the experience and pressure. If they can handle that, then I do think that the guard is having a serious chance of beating Optic, but we cannot disregard the pressure of being there in Iceland, no?
I guess now you just see the dichotomy of NA people. On the one hand, you have Optic, who are like, you're all shit, and we're never practicing you again. Then the other team's like, we 13-0 you respectfully, and we'll continue to play practice earnestly. Like, okay, fair enough, fucking hell. Are these from the same country? This is amazing.
It really reminds me, like, when on my own YouTube channel, I did like an interview with Net, who's one of the players on the guard, and him talking about like how, you know, how they go about that, both him for himself, but also in the team, like their attitude towards like work and just remaining like constantly focused on stuff like that, and you know, trying to be like healthy, both do it in a healthy way, like not super overworking themselves and going like crazy, but like being very dedicated to just constantly trying to improve and not. So I know he's a young player, and he kind of like was doing it like fresh out of university, and he has had experience in, I mean, he's like this like wonder child, you know, like I think he was a lacrosse player, and he was also involved in like the student council and stuff. Like oh my God, he did all of this stuff, and I'm like, wow, you're like a good kid. But it's like the fact that someone young can be brought in and shaped to, I suppose that when I say young, there are definitely players younger than him, but they can be brought in and shaped to just have such humility when going about like their attitude towards improving. And I think that for the fact that they've been able to set that in stone so quickly as a new roster is really good, because I love watching trash talk as much as the next person. I think it's super entertaining. But when you let that get in the way of like your attitude to your own failures and improvement, and it almost becomes like a bit of a defense, that's a problem. And I say that as someone who is massively defensive and really bad at failing at things, right? So
okay, fair enough.
You know, absolutely, I'm terrible at it. I wouldn't go quite as far as to like shit on someone for it, but like I definitely have that natural inclination to want to like push the blame elsewhere, right? And it's like that is a really, really good thing to have like nailed down as such a fundamental part of the operation of your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really do think that we need to give MCE. I don't know how you say MC or however you say it. You know, we need to give the credits to him of the work that he have been putting in, and they were not irrelevant in the start of the split, right? They were still like, they're probably good, and probably the teams in scrims, they probably say, they like they did with us, you know. People went out in social media and say like, hey, the Guild new lineup, even though they have 3 new ones, we should count with them, you know. They will be there. They probably had the knowledge behind it, but bringing that team, also they live together, right? They I think the team is living together, and that's even harder. That's even harder, you know, if you take it from the perspective of living together and competing together, guys. That is not easy. You need to have someone in the leadership that is very good at what he's doing. You like in terms of players getting frustrated with each other and stuff like this, that you really need to have a good leader to lead a project with young players, you know. That's super important. So all creds to MCE for what he have been doing with the guys. I haven't seen that in Valorant yet, and him doing it with kind of new young players is absolutely incredible. They should be. I see them as well. FBX also probably, you know, Angel. How he's forming his squads, you know, and being able to do the same stuff he do with a sub or 2 even, you know. But for now, I would say the guard is the team you should probably look at to understand how you maximize your game, you know, and that needs a strong leader behind it. So I agree completely, like coming in new players and not very super much experience, you know, and then maybe competed in real life, if you want to call it, before. That always helps, obviously, you know, but all credits to the coach for pulling all that together in one split and making it sing is incredible.
Right, one of the only teams we haven't talked about that's going to be relevant still in the tournament is obviously G2, who were already seeded into the bracket. So here's the thing, Gio. As much as people have been very critical of this team and they wonder should they make roster moves, they're now in a position where if they beat Zeta Division and maybe Team Liquid, they're going to be guaranteed top 3 at the LAN. Like, things could turn around pretty quickly for G2. It looks like they're in a good position, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it's almost kind of like similar to the story that we had at Berlin, where G2 got pretty far up the bracket, but they were kind of like fresh off of their roster changes just then. So that was like the new G2. And I kind of want to reiterate what I said, I think, last week, which was the big difference with G2 now is that we've got Mixwell taking on, like, you know, the main entry role and not keloqz. And keloqz popping off on LAN at Berlin was part of the reason why, I think a relevant part of the reason why they did as well as they did then.
I saw someone made a graph, because you might have seen this, where it showed Year's performance was like the best ever at Masters. Like, keloqz was one of the higher ones too. That was like one of the best performances ever at one of these LANs, apparently.
keloqz was so much fun to watch as well.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big factor they don't have him, right?
No, it was awesome. But I think that G2 have looked like, now that they like settled their whole like roster shit, and like straight after they did that and they decided that Mixwell was going to be the guy, I definitely had some criticisms. I have not been as huge a fan as with Mixwell being on that role as keloqz. I think that keloqz is intuitively a much better jet player. I think that Mixwell's entries can sometimes go a little bit less supported and just be able to hold themselves a little bit less well. But I think that Ardis actually last week made a really good point, which was that like the G2 playstyle simply isn't just, especially with Mixwell on the role, just isn't meant to be as flashy. Like, that's not what they're trying to do. It's like Mixwell does what he has to do, and he does, like, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but it's like he covers what the jet is, requested of. And it is, everything else they do. It's like on a fundamental level, it's quite good. I think that we spoke about it before. Nukier is going to be like that player to watch, and Nukier has been on fucking fire the last stage or so, and seeing him like play that on LAN, I want to see, like, because they're going to be playing Zeta Division, and I already said that 10 on Zeta, he was their Raze player, has been doing really well. Nukier versus 10 is definitely a matchup that I'm super stoked for.
Okay.
But I think that, yeah, that sort of like strong kind of fundamental that G2 have managed to like really like garner for themselves after some tumultuous things at the beginning of the stage, should actually work in their favor, and I expect G2 to have a pretty good run.
I agree completely. What is the difference between Kellogg's and Mixwell, right? The Kellogg's is probably gonna shoot more headshots than Mixwell, right? Or more flashy 2Ks or even a 3K when there shouldn't be one, But then also Mixwell understands how to play the situation, all of the situations, Like it's not only entering, going there, die, going there, die. That's what they used Kellogg's for. Someone needs to go first, guys. Who will it be? Who will it be? So Mixwell is covering more points of the map of every situation. In a round, especially if you play like G2, it's gonna be probably a 20-30 situations you need to be able to handle, which I don't think Kellogg's is there yet, right? He will come there. He will just need some experience. We tried him out in Guild also when getting Colamenta when he was benched out of G2, and I could see the talent he's having. The talent that Kellogg's is having is absolutely fantastic. But he needs someone, a coach or someone that is telling him this is not good enough. You need to do this. But Mixwell is covering so much more and also having the tournament experience. It wouldn't matter in Kellogg's case because he just sent it, But you will be able to play slow with Mixwell. You will be able to play fast with Mixwell, And with Kellogg's, probably the slow one you could punish Kellogg's in that kind of gameplay, Also, what I think in general is that G2 is going on honeymoon, which is super easy right now. In CS:GO, yes, a honeymoon is strong, guys. Don't get me wrong. We saw Face with help me here.
They just did ROPS just now.
Yeah. And they had a stand in the Australian.
JKS.
Right? Yeah. It's strong still, but in Valorant is hyper strong because the players right now, on an experience level, emotionally and mentally, doesn't understand what a honeymoon is yet, and they don't understand the energy you need to put in after the honeymoon, if it makes sense, right? You need to put in energy as a person, as a leader. You need to understand when the honeymoon is ending to be able to fix it or to get past it. Elsewhere, always the answer is gonna be, we need to change a player, right? We need to change this because the game is not working. No, because the players get tired of each other. It's not that fun anymore. You need to find a way to practice. So that is what I see that G2 have been doing even a week before the VCT is starting, or even when the VCT qualifier is running. They created honeymoon on honeymoon with swapping Mixwell and Kellogg's, And when you win a game, when you're swapping out a player, suddenly you're going to feel like, oh, we found it.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna work, right? So I would say Kellogg's is gonna reach there if he doesn't give up, or if he's not lazy, Like I know Kellogg's likes the outside life also, Like some of the young guys do, I want to hang out a bit, I want to get a new car, drive around, whatever, So I do think that Mixwell is filling more criteria for now, and it's naturally a better choice than Kellogg's, But Kellogg's is an investment for the future, not for now, But to be an investment for the future, you obviously need to play high pressure games or have someone to tell him what to do, kind of, So. Yeah, no, Mixwell for sure right now is the better option. He will dominate tournaments. He knows he will not get nervous at all. He's been around for too long to get nervous. He knows how to play more scenarios. So for sure, a better choice than Kellogg's right now. Yeah.
Do you have this? Did you have this concept in games you were in, Gio, the honeymoon period?
This is the first I've kind of heard. I mean, I suppose the idea exists, but I've never heard it be referred to anything specifically named. I assume it's something you have a new roster or a new whatever.
Basically, yeah.
Like a good...
Basically, it's the idea that when you make a new roster, for some reason, the first couple of weeks after, it always seems like it's way better than you expect. Like, holy shit. And in fact, even famously, sometimes you go to a tournament, you might even win right out the gate. But there's a few factors that are obvious. Like one part ties into what he's saying about when it gets old and you've had the same team for a long time. When you bring someone new in, right, not only is it like he comes in, but everyone else gets excited. Like, right, it's possible
there's something new to work with. Yeah.
And also, oftentimes, in the early days, because you're so eager to make a new squad with this guy, maybe you even like, I'll give up my role to you and I'll sacrifice to make it work. So in the first few weeks, by the way, you do that consciously, thinking, oh, we've got to get him in the team. But also maybe in a month you realise, I don't like playing like that. Maybe I don't want him to just be this, maybe he's just a teammate now. And then the other factor as well is, obviously in games that are preparation heavy, like tactical shooters, it just means the opponent can't have prepared for you. So sometimes if you have something half decent out the gate, it might just work for the first tournament because people haven't figured out what you're doing or how that new player works. So unfortunately, the reason he's bringing it up is because in Counter-Strike in particular, because it's a game where like, it's a more simple game. You can change people in and out and you can get them up to speed in a month or so. Unfortunately, teams can get addicted to this cycle though, where like he's saying, you do it, it's great for 2 weeks. Then when you're a real team again and you have to practice like normal, you're not as good. So you're like, fuck, changing. It's like you're changing the dragon. You keep switching another guy out.
Yeah.
And there's teams that have done this for years. And in fact, the worst thing is they're the ones that always then, even though they do it, they're the ones that are always also like, oh, I never have my real team though, so these results don't count. It's like, give me a break, mate. Because that even the analogy for me, I think every gamer should know this analogy. It's like if you change your sensitivity, right? When you change your sensitivity, for an hour afterwards, you always think, holy fuck, I've actually low-key found the secret sensitivity of the universe. I'm actually a god now. But it's not. What it is, right? You probably used a slow sensitivity, say, and you put it higher. So what happens is you hit a flick that you never would hit with the low sense. So you're like, holy shit, I've completed my game. But what you don't realise is, in the same way as you'll hit the flick there, you're going to miss the low fucking Axel spray, aren't you? Because you have the, you know, so it's more just like, I think a lot of it's like a mind illusion. That's why I agree. You have to get past it. You can't put too much stock in it, otherwise you will get addicted to that stupid cycle. Because at the end of the day, here's the problem. Let's say it wins you a tournament or even makes you initially really good. You're not going to be like the best team of all time if you keep watching players. Like, there's a reason why on the last episode, everyone was basically just praising to the rafters the fucking Gambit squad because they don't change players. They just keep the same amazing lineup and figure out how to make it work. That's the most impressive, for sure.
That is 100%.
Yeah, it's like the current world champions in Rainbow Six, which is TSM. Their roster has been together for ages, but they have undergone like role changes in that time,
right?
Which, you know, have obviously kind of like changed the way they play, and some of them it's just been like 2 guys will have switched a role, like rather than like really like drastic, and then maybe later on, if like the meta changes or there's new maps in the map pool, whatever it is, they might like switch back, whatever, they might just change for a game or something, and I think like that's always kind of nice when you can see that sort of like versatility within the team and them like being able to cover different things. But I am quite like on the side of don't change your roster every 3 weeks. Like I actually did a video on my channel, like it was called something like our roster swap's bad for esports, and like TLDR, to an extent, yes, like unless there's clearly a problem that needs to be addressed, like you can't build anything, like you can't develop anything. Yes. You just want to fucking change it every 2 weeks. Like it's ridiculous.
Well done on the clickbait on that title, by the way. You actually nailed that. You even, it's the way you didn't just say like for Valorant, you tied it into all of esports. Yeah. Like, well, that's good. That's good clickbait. I like that.
It's true, but it is true for like all esports. I think it's because I've spoken about it before for other esports. So I'm like, right, fuck it. I'm not doing one for each individual game. I'm just gonna be like, for all of esports, this needs to fucking stop.
Yes. Everyone just stop changing players in all esports simultaneously? That's all Gio's question. It's not much. Right, BARBARR, here's my question. Here's what we'll do at the end. I want to know this. There's 8 teams left in the tournament to double a limb, so in theory, like, the best team should win. The format's pretty sturdy in that sense. Which team would you pick to win this tournament now, BARBARR? Who's going to be the champion?
If the guard beat Optic, they will win. They will win Masters. You said champions. You mean champions?
No, I mean this champion of this tournament.
Yeah.
Champion of the tournament.
No, if the guard managed to beat Optic, then they will win. And I would say if Optic managed to beat the guard, they will win the tournament. I actually think so.
And give me an MVP as well. Who will the MVP be then if they win? Which player is going to be the best?
If the guard wins, you know, or Optic, or one of them. I mean, Jay is probably one of them, right? And I would say like, what would we say? it's so dually, like it's still so dualist based, you know, like how are you gonna...
By the way, he's Swedish, so he means yay there, but it sounded like he said J, I know, but that's just sweet Swenglish, don't worry about that, it's all good. He meant yay from Optic. I get
job, you mean.
Exactly, I understood you, it's all good.
Yeah.
What about from the Guard then? Who would the Guard's MVP be if they win?
I would say Trent is super important for the Guard. Trent is absolutely amazing as a coach. Trent is very heavy for that team. We have a little conversation in the prac actually, you know, where their coach said like, yeah, we wanted Leo from your team. We were talking about like, why don't we get Leo, you know, from Guild to the Guard, you know? And I was making a joke also. Yeah, we did the same with Trent. You know, we wanted Trent for our team, but you know, we were happy with our lineup. It was just a pre-prac chat, you know, in the lobby. But no, I would say Jay if they nail it. If Optic wins.
Yes.
And I would say Trent probably is the instrumental player in the Guard if the Guard managed to. I would say the winner between Optic and the Guard will win Masters. Yeah.
Right, obviously, Gio, you will have a chance on future episodes to update this opinion and potentially change it. So we're not going to just wreck it completely. But what is your thoughts at this point in time? Who would you pick?
I actually would have probably said the exact same as what you just said, because I think I came into the tournament expecting Optic to be the best team in the competition, and I think that for me to change my mind to be the Guard, I have to see that the Guard can perform on LAN, so they have to be Optic. DRX potentially up there, because obviously DRX are going to play whoever wins that game. And so I think we will know relatively early on out of those three where they all sit amongst each other. The other team that could have a really good run, I think, is like Team Liquid have proven that they could do a really good job, but I don't know, maybe it's bias. Like something like tells me if like Team Liquid have to come up against one of the NA teams later on, that the NA teams would still have. I think it's either going to be Optic or the Guard, and now I've said that it's not going to be either of them, but like I that's where my gut is telling me. As for the MVPs, I probably would have said something very similar. If it wouldn't be Yay from Optic, like based on current performance, because like I would want to say based on performance of all of stage 1, like FNS would be in the conversation, but I actually think Crashies could potentially be up there as well, because I think his Sova play I think he's a very solid Sova anyway, but in the games that they've played so far, I think that he's had quite an influence. And then from the Guard, if it's not Trent, if the Guard do really well and they win, I think that a big reason for that would be Valen, because we have to remember that he is he's the IGL, and he's a very young IGL. Like in terms, he has not been an IGL for a very long time. Yep. So for Valen to IGL the Guard to not just the finals but to a win, I think he would have to be in conversation for MVP.
Absolutely. We have Victor in there too, guys. We cannot forget about Victor, you know. There's some hilarious stats when he do good and when he do bad, you know, how Optics are looking, you know. So there's probably
how much Neon he's going to play.
Oh, Jesus, no, that's a nightmare for the teams, right? You know, the Neon also is a nightmare for the teams to play.
By the way, that's one thing we can loop back, and we'll make this last point to the beginning of the show. Isn't that the weirdest thing about him talking about everyone else having the cringe comps? Then he's the fucker just putting Neons in the game.
Optic,
like, what?
They're the Neon team. Yeah.
Isn't he the cringe one? What the fuck?
Actually true.
That's the weirdest part about that statement, isn't it? I know you're the ones doing it. You're the ones running the cheesy shit.
Because they're playing it on Fracture as well as Haven now. True. So like they just fucking love that agent.
Yeah, especially against fast teams, you know, Neon is a nightmare to play against. If you want to play a fast game, you know, Neon is actually a nightmare to play against with the double stun. So I agree completely. Hey, Chet, you're playing Neon on 2 maps also.
Exactly. Come on, bro. Exactly.
It's funny though. Chet was one of them. I when I transferred from CS:GO, he was one of the first in Valorant, obviously, you know, and he was one of them. I asked how do you think it's gonna look like, you know, right. How is this gonna be, you know, do you recommend it, or where do you think it's gonna be, you know? So I have him to thank for it. It's growing all the time, obviously, or we wouldn't sit here, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I have a lot of respect for Chet. I have a lot of respect for him, you know, even though we're memeing about what he's saying, you know, like he just needs some media training and
it's an overreaction. Yeah, people will realise you'll like him in the end. Don't worry, he'll all work out. Yeah, it's just you've just had a bad first impression, and also he's American. So when Americans talk shit, the rest of us in the world are just like, shut the fuck up, America. Like, that's just the way it is. There's too many decades now. It's not your fault, boys. It's baggage from past esports games. Yeah, exactly.
The Yanks are at it again.
Exactly. Yes. This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, William Peyton Lacy, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Want to suggest a topic or a guest? Want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? I promise they're coming. Want teasers for my upcoming content? Would you like to be in one of those lengthy donated discussions with me? Well, if any of the above tickles your fancy or the other perks available, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today, where? In the description box below.